Today is February 21st, 2023. My name is Joe Todd. This is an interview with Peter Johnson in Bartlesville, Oklahoma. Sir, where were you born?
I was born in Winfield, Illinois.
When's your birthday?
20 December 1965.
1965. Who is your father?
Bruce Johnson.
And your mother?
Dolores Johnson.
What was her maiden name?
Erickson.
Erickson. Did you go through school in Winfield?
I didn't. I was born in the Chicago area, but essentially grew up, moved to California when I was 5. Grew up in California.
Where in California?
Glendora, California.
Glendora. Okay. You go to school in Glendora?
I went to school in Glendora.
What year did you graduate?
Graduated high school in 84.
1984. Who was your favorite teacher?
Ooh, that's a hard one. Well, I would say elementary school, it would have to be Mr. Bates.
Mr. Bates. Why was he your favorite?
He was a World War II veteran, saw a lot of combat in World War II. He was originally a high school teacher, but realized that if he really wanted to make a difference with kids, he had to hit them earlier before high school. Mm-hmm. So he went from a high school teacher to a 5th grade teacher, and I had him in 5th grade, and
yes.
He's one of those guys that, what you just described in our earlier conversation, that just make a difference in people's lives.
Yes, okay. What type of work did your father do?
He was a lawyer.
Lawyer, okay. What chores did you do around the house?
What chores did I do around the house? Well, growing up in Southern California, we had an acre of property. We had 2 horses. We had a goat. We had chickens, ducks. We had tons of fruit trees, orange, citrus of all kinds, grapefruit, lemons. So there was a lot of work. It was more than just mowing the lawn, and it was planting trees, pruning trees, fruit. So,
where is Glendora located?
Glendora is about 15 miles east of Pasadena. It's up against the San Gabriel Mountains.
Yes, okay. What did you do for recreation in the summer when you were not in school?
When I wasn't in school, I spent as much time as I could up in the mountains. Mm-hmm. I was just avid outdoorsman from a young age. I was either hunting, fishing, hiking, wildlife watching, one of those things.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. What did you do after high school?
After high school, I went to college.
Where'd you go?
Initially, my freshman year, I was at Wheaton College near Chicago, and that's where I applied for an Army ROTC scholarship.
Tell me about ROTC. What did you do in ROTC?
Well, back then, my motivation was to pay for college. I always wanted to be in the Army as a young age. I never thought I'd make it a career. But even a young age, my dad was in the Army before he was a lawyer, and I'd hear his stories. And so I wanted to be in the Army, but I saw it as 4 years at the most. I almost enlisted. My dad said, no, let's do that in college, do ROTC. So that's what I did. So in ROTC, they take college students. Reserve Officers Training Corps is what it stands for. And they train you how to be an officer all 4 years in college. You have classroom instruction, you have field training, and you have a commitment in the summer to go to different posts. I went to Fort Lewis, Washington, where you're evaluated and trained and assessed. And so it's 4 years of military training co-aligned with your college courses.
Okay. Now, was Fort Lewis your summer camp?
It was.
Tell me about Fort Lewis. What did you do there?
Fort Lewis, they bring all the, it's different now, but back then ROTC was divided into regions. So I was in the Western Pacific region and went from Southern California to Fort Lewis. Fort Lewis is beautiful. In fact, I have a son there now as a transportation officer, 2nd lieutenant. And it's just gorgeous. I mean, you're in these beautiful woods, Sitka spruce, Douglas fir, and you go through a series of tactical training and assessments. They're really assessing your leadership ability, and it's I don't know how long it was, maybe 8 weeks. And then after that, I did what was called CLTC, Cadet Troop Leadership Training, where you, as a cadet, you come under a company and you shadow another lieutenant, a platoon leader. So I did that at Fort Ord with a field artillery unit, just to get further active duty experience and just see what the active duty Army was like.
What year did you receive your degree and your commission?
I received the degree in '88, and it was in biology. And then I was commissioned a little later. I was commissioned in, I'm sorry. I was commissioned in '88, and I graduated '89.
Okay. After you got your commission and your degree, what'd you do?
Then I was assessed armor with tanks. So I went to Fort Knox, Kentucky, what then was called Armor Officers Basic Course, and was there for about 4 months.
Tell me about your basic course.
Basic course was a group of newly commissioned second lieutenants in armor go to Fort Knox, Kentucky, which then was the home of armor, and they trained you how to be a tank platoon leader. So all aspects of tactics, logistics, supply, leadership, tank gunnery, a 10-day war when you're out maneuvering on tanks. And
What tanks did you have?
their training in the 10-day war, we were trained on M60A3s. We also had M1s.
Is that the Abrams?
The Abrams M1, which was the 105 millimeter rifled barrel, and later on the M1A1, which was 120 millimeter smoothbore. Yeah.
What's the crew of the M1?
The M1 is a crew of 4.
4.
Yeah, you have a driver, you have a gunner, you have a loader, and a tank commander.
Okay. And you were the tank commander.
Right.
I've often wondered, when you're in a firing situation in combat, what do you do with all the casings inside the tank?
So that's a great question. So tanker boots, you may have seen those in Vietnam. Instead of lacing, a tanker boot often had a long leather strap that would wrap around your shin and then buckle up. Because as you were shooting your tanks, you get these, if someone shot a rifle, you get like maybe a 30-06 brass casing. Well, you're talking a casing about this long that gets hot.
About 2 feet?
Right, for either a saber round or a heat round, and those would build up in the tank. And of course, if you were in combat or even the intense situation of tank gunnery, those build up quick. It's the job of the loader in a combat situation just to throw them out the hatch. But in a training situation, you have to, you're accountable to every round. So we got to count the expended casings, you got to turn them in. But the M1A1, most of the round is combusted. So you get what's called an aft cap. It's just the rim of the round and a metal, where the propellant, it's a tube with holes in it that helps equalize the ignition of the propellant.
Now, what does a tank commander do?
So there's kind of 2 types of tank commanders. So in a platoon, you have the tank platoon leader that's responsible for the whole platoon, which is 4 tanks. So often the platoon leader's tank, the gunner, kind of acts as the tank commander in absence of the lieutenant. So you got to have a seasoned gunner for the platoon leader's tank and the platoon sergeant's tank. And then the platoon sergeant and the platoon leader each have a wingman. So you have 4 tank commanders in a tank platoon. One's the lieutenant, one's the platoon sergeant, and then 2 are NCOs that in an infantry unit would be like a squad leader, but they're in charge of their tank and their crew.
So how long did your officer's basic last?
It was 3.5 months, I think.
What's your most vivid memory of officer's basic?
My most vivid memory, here's Here's my most vivid memory. It's not, doesn't sound exciting to you, but it was a 10-day war, which is Fort Knox, Kentucky. And in that 10-day war, it was a cold snap that can happen here in Oklahoma. I mean, it was freezing cold, and we're in our tanks, 10 days out in the field, and it's just freezing cold. And the chow truck comes in, a deuce and a half truck with our breakfast. And the M60A3 tank has a steep slope, the front slope. So I put my chow up there and I had my hot coffee, which I was looking forward to. And I spilled my hot coffee on that slope. And I could see the coffee, which was hot, go. And within a second was froze solid. I just watched it freeze. I don't know why that sticks in my head, but that's one of my memories. And that was symbolic of how cold it was.
After Officers Basic, where'd you go?
After Officers Basic course, I went to the Army Ranger School.
Okay.
Yeah.
Which is located at?
Several places. You start at Fort Benning, Georgia, and you start there for the initial phase, which is trying to weed you out and diminish the class size. The Ranger School is the Army's leadership school, small infantry tactics. And then you start after it's kind of called the Benning phase. And then you start with squad tactics at Fort Benning, and then you move from there to the mountain phase, which was up in near Dahlonega, Georgia, at Yonah Mountain, and you learn mountain tactics, mountaineering, and you're cold, you're miserable, you don't sleep, you don't eat, you don't wear any snovel gear, warm clothing. You're just miserable. After the mountain phase, then you go down to Eglin Air Force Base, which is right on the coast of Florida, on the Panhandle, and you do the jungle phase there. And then after that, I went to Dugway, Utah for the desert phase. All said and done, it was about 80 plus days.
Now, where were you in Georgia?
You start at Fort Benning, Georgia,
Fort Benning.
and then the mountain phase is up in Dahlonega, Georgia, up in the mountains. of
Dahlonega,
Georgia.
okay.
Yeah, Dahlonega, yeah.
Okay. Now, what's your most vivid memory of Ranger School?
Oh, I have many vivid memories of Ranger School. Which one? Here's when you start. I finished the basic course in Kentucky. Some of my friends and I traveled together from Fort Knox, which is Kentucky, down to Fort Benning, Georgia, and we're getting ready for Ranger School. We know this is a big deal, and so there's this military store there called Ranger Joe's. You probably heard of Ranger Joe's. So we're getting all our equipment, and then we'd see another second lieutenant that already completed the course with a Ranger tab, and we're like, hey, what was it like, And it was like, oh, it was crazy. People hallucinate, and you hear all these stories of people hallucinating, doing crazy things, and you're like, oh, we know it's hard, but it wasn't that hard. This guy's exaggerating. But I think just my most vivid memory is when, here's one. We were in the mountain phase in Georgia, and literally we started our patrolling on Monday, and we didn't sleep a wink till Friday. And so literally people were hallucinating. You're just so, the intent is to stress you out with the elements. You're on the verge of hypothermia. I was a winter ranger, no sleep, no food, and they want to see if you can still operate tactically, lead under those stressors, which are designed to mimic combat stress. Yeah.
What type of quarters did you have out there?
So you would have different phases, and initially you would be in basic Army barracks for those phases, but then you spend 2 weeks out in the field, and you're out in the field.
You sleep out in the open or what?
Sleep out in the open. You're not sleeping in a sleeping bag.
Okay.
You might get away with a poncho liner just rolled up in the bushes, but you're in the elements. You're in Florida. We were on the Yellow River. You're just you're wet, cold all the time, muddy. You know, in the mountain phase, that we did have some pretty intense mountaineering. You know, rappelling, mountain climbing with ropes. So there we would sleep in tents because they want you somewhat aware, so people don't fall off cliffs and so forth. Yeah.
Okay. So after Ranger School, where'd you go?
After Ranger School, I had orders to go to Fort Hood, Texas, to 1st Cavalry Division, and I was assigned to 3rd Platoon, Alpha Company, 1st of the 32nd Armor.
That's my unit in Vietnam.
Oh, was it really?
That's first air cab in Vietnam.
Okay, yeah. That was 1st Cav, and so I got
Now
there.
what unit in the first cab again?
I was 2nd Brigade,
Okay.
1st of the 32nd Armor, 132 Armor. And so I got there right after Ranger School, which I think was a June 12th, 1990 report date. And August of that same year, we were on alert for Desert Storm.
Now, how did you prepare for Desert Shield?
So I remember one day, it was a Tuesday because that was what we called our command maintenance day. The whole company was up in the motor pool, you're doing maintenance on the tanks. And I remember showing up, and my platoon sergeant, Sergeant First Class Peter Higgins, came up to me and said, "Hey sir, did you hear Saddam Hussein just went into Kuwait?" And as a dumb second lieutenant, I literally responded with, "Who's Saddam Hussein and where's Kuwait?" And so August we were alerted, and October we deployed.
Yeah.
And so how do we prepare? So then we had M1 tanks, Abrams M1, which was the 105 rifled cannon, and the large casings that would come off of that. So we needed track really bad. We needed maintenance. Just there's a lot of maintenance on a tank, and so we were working. I mean, 16 plus hour days working on our tank, getting everything ready to go. Supplies fell from the sky, literally Chinook helicopters bringing in equipment. And so that's what we were really working on, is just getting our tanks up to snuff. Of course, you had to go through tank gunnery, bore sighting, tactical training, all of that. Everyone had to be certified. You had to get your crews certified, all of that, so you were ready to go. Initially deployed to Saudi Arabia, and our battalion, in fact, our brigade was literally out in the just remote deserts.
How did you travel to Arabia?
Before we left Fort Hood, we had to move our equipment by rail. So you load it up on the rail, which comes right through Fort Hood. That took all of our equipment, tanks, Humvees, other armored vehicles, Bradleys, 113s, all of that, down to the port of Galveston, loaded them on ships, special ships for transporting these vehicles, and that ship I think went to Saudi Arabia. Then we deployed on aircraft, obviously, got to Saudi Arabia, received our equipment at the port.
What port?
I don't
Was
remember.
it Dhahran?
Yes, it was.
Okay.
It was Dhahran. Yes, I remember. I was in Dhahran. I remember that.
Were you in Kobar Towers?
I was coming back, redeploying. We were at Kobar Towers.
When you arrived, where did you stay?
When we arrived, what we called Tent City. I remember, but I think it might have been King Khalid Military City. We weren't there very long. We moved quickly, so we were in a receiving center. It was just a large impoundment of just GP mediums and GP larges as far as you could see, tents. And we received our vehicles and our equipment. And then we went out into the desert. And it was just a long convoy, leaving. And first, I think we had to put our vehicles on hats. Hats are large trucks, very large trucks that move 70-ton tanks, so you don't have to move the tanks. They brought us out from the city into the desert, and then from there I don't know exactly where we were in the desert, but the only people we ever saw were the occasional Bedouins, and I mean primitive Bedouins, camels, tents. Then we got the word to come back to Tehran. So we took all our tanks, convoyed our tanks back to Tehran, and there we got brand new M1A1 tanks. So now 105 millimeter smoothbore, brand new tanks with brand new tank smell, just like getting a new car. It was so nice if you know like property and supply. So as a tank platoon leader, I had my big book of all the equipment, everything I was signed for, and I could just throw it away. And I had everything brand new. 4 brand new tanks, 4 with brand new BII, brand new machine guns, brand new everything. BII, basic issue, stands for, it's your basic equipment.
Okay.
Issued equipment.
Okay.
You know what BII is what goes on the tank, everything from equipment, tools, wrenches, screwdrivers, grease guns, every element you would need on a tank. And then of course your weapon systems. So the loader has a 30 caliber machine gun. There's a coax machine gun for the gunner. There's a 50 cal for the tank commander. All that was brand new. So here we are with brand new equipment, brand new tanks, brand new weapons. We went out to gunnery because now we had to certify that equipment, which means you've got to calibrate your tank, got to bore sight it, you got to do tank gunnery, you're certified as a crew again on the new weapon systems. Then we went back out into the middle of the desert, and we were just kind of waiting. Now, if you remember Desert Storm, it was the January 15th deadline that we were all waiting for. So we are there as a show of force initially, just waiting for orders. Now, of course, we did training out in the middle of the desert. We did physical training, we did tactical training, all sorts of things. But then January 15th came. And I remember nothing really happened. It wasn't until January 17th is what I remember. And we were all on alert. And, you have a helmet, kind of like a pilot helmet with a mic system. And I remember our commander getting online and it was dark. It must have been 4 a.m. And all I could hear was just sound of jets. Just going, just the sound of jets. And then as dawn came, you could just see all these jets flying. And then above the jets, you could see way up in the stratosphere bombers, And we got these reports that, Baghdad was bombed and now it's time to move. And so we moved from our position heading north. And what we really recovered, our sector was really, if you look at Kuwait, bordering Iraq, there is what it looks like a diamond. And Iraq says they own that area. Kuwait says they own that. We went right through that. And 1st Cav's mission was to go through the Wadi, a very large wadi, which is a washed out valley, a drainage, a tactical area where you could hit low. That was called the Wadi al-Batin. And so we were moving north as a division, north on Wadi al-Batin, and our role with 1st Cav was really to be obvious, to move north and to get Saddam Hussein's attention. So we were moving north, he was moving south to meet us, and then 5th Corps and 7th Corps hit them on the flank, and that's where you had the Medina Ridge and the other things. So we ran into their first elements, scout, light infantry, but we didn't have any tank-on-tank contact. It was mainly their lighter forces. And most of these people gave up in droves. I mean, just the biggest issue we had was how to process POWs.
How'd you process them?
It was, so I remember one of our battles, it was the berm buster missions. We were on the Iraqis built these huge berms. 1st Infantry Division breached the berm, and we would go through them. And we were in our first firefight, and much of the Iraqis were dug in. So they had trenches, they had holes. It would be easy to bypass them on a moving tank. So we were actually in contact, and next thing you know, there'd be Iraqis right next to me, you know. And as a tank commander, we had an M4 carbine inside that we just got with the new tanks. I had a 50 cal right in front of me, but I also had a 1911 45, you know. And I pulled that out in the Iraqi, and I realized he was just trying to give up. But what we would do is behind the fighters were the MPs. And so we would just wave them back however we could. They didn't speak English. We didn't speak Arabic. We would just point back, and they would go. We would just let them go behind us. But now we had to be sure they weren't armed the best we could, and then the MPs would pick them up and then process them. Yeah, but it was. I mean, the movement was amazing because these were Cold War era movements that we did. That, you know, with the GWOT we were not doing. So I remember. The sand, the desert, was like a sand parking lot as far as you could see. It was like a sand sea. And the tanks were like an enormous naval fleet. But what we had were just the tanks in the front. So I'm on the front line in the tank, and there's nothing before me. But if I looked as far as I could see to the left, it was just a line of tanks and Bradleys. If I looked to the right, as far as I could see, it was a line of tanks. And we're moving like 30 miles per hour. And then you look behind, which unfortunately back then we called, we called it the ash and trash. You know, it was all the essential supply and logistic elements. But you could look behind, and as far as I could see was just echeloned elements of support, you know, artillery. Behind the artillery were the trucks and the fuelers and everything else with rooster tails of dust. And then in front of us was this ominous black cloud. I mean, just jet black sky because all the oil fields were burning, you know. So it was apocalyptic. So it was just an amazing sight. But to see those military formations, massive armor, maneuvering with all the logistics echelon behind you was amazing.
In our briefings, they told us that Saddam may use chemical weapons.
Yes.
What do you think about this?
So we had our M8 alarms, we had our anthrax shots, we had obviously our protective mask that had to be on us at all times. There were some reports that the M8 alarms went off. I don't know. Of course, back then we were taking the PB tablets. Remember those?
Yes.
Those were the little bit of nerve agent, or, you know, to get you immune from nerve agent. But as far as any validity, did we pick up any nerve agent, blood agent? I don't know.
Okay.
Yeah.
So how long did the war last?
So that was January 17th that we moved north, our unit. And I remember the ceasefire was February 28th.
Mm-hmm. So where did your unit end up?
We moved north from Saudi Arabia into we were just south of Basra, Iraq,
Okay.
when the ceasefire hit.
Okay. So you did not go into, did you go into Kuwait?
Nope, Kuwait was to our east.
Okay.
So I was at Fort Hood with 1st Cav, but we also had 2nd Armored Division at Fort Hood. 2nd Armored Division, the Tiger Brigade, went into Kuwait. The Marines came in from the Gulf Coast, and we were Saudi Arabia into Iraq, just shy of Basra, when we stopped. Yeah.
So did you have any firefights in your tank?
We deployed against infantry, mortarmen, T-10 anti-tank guns, which was sort of like a smaller but more modern version of the M88. It's a cannon on wheels that the Iraqis used in their trenches. And we did have some casualties, not in our battalion, but in a sister battalion where those T-10s hit Bradleys, killed the crew member. So I remember in one of our fights, we could look ahead of us, hundreds of meters in front of us, and we could see Iraqi positions. We were glassing them online. We had just gone through a tank mine, a minefield, and that was pretty hairy. I remember one tank hit a mine, and it blew off the number one road wheel of the tank. And the tank commander, who I knew, Sergeant Reel, he got out, and the driver is in front of the hall, right next to where that came up. So he opened up his hatch, he had his bell rung, and that evening we captured an Iraqi officer. And he said to us, he spoke English. He was actually educated in the United States. He went to, I don't know what college he went to, but he spoke perfect English. Mm-hmm. And he said, "How did you guys get through the minefield?" And I said, "Well, we had our engineers breach it. We did it one tank." I wasn't talking to him. This was a discussion unfolding that I heard. But he said, "Well, what happened to the tank that hit the mine? That was the best Soviet mine, anti-tank mines we could get." And we just said, "It just blew off the number one road wheel, and in 20 minutes we replaced it, and like nothing happened." And then so we were lined up, and behind us was several batteries of artillery, self-propelled howitzers, and they shot. They were like right behind us, did the volley over us, and then we were moving forward towards these Iraqi forces. So we're having artillery shoot, and then our mortars were shooting as well as we got closer, right? Because the 155, the 105, the M9 howitzers, self-propelled howitzers, could shoot further, and then the mortars were shooting. And I remember pulling up my tank, and we stopped, and we're in the middle of the desert. And I remember looking at my tank, and right in front of me is an engineer stake. That's a metal cattle stake that you see with barbed wire. And I remember thinking to myself, what's that stake doing in the middle of the desert? And next thing I know, mortar rounds started falling like right around us. One hit right, so my platoon sergeant's here, I'm here, we're tactically separated, but a mortar round landed right next to his tank, blew all the equipment off the bustle rack, ruptured the oil tanks and the class 3 items there, and that burnt on the engine, so there's big billowing smoke, and he thought his tank was hit. I thought it was our own mortars landing short, so I'm getting on the radio saying, "Hey, the mortars are hitting short, they're hitting my platoon," and all of a sudden, being a naive lieutenant, there's an engineer stake in the middle of the desert, and what that is this enemy TRP, a target reference point. So we pulled up right to one of their target reference points, and that's where the mortars were landing right on top of us. And then we moved forward, because the mortars are high arcing, and we moved forward to get out of that arc, and then we engaged them with machine guns. And then we were shooting bunkers with heat rounds, high explosive anti-tank rounds. But we weren't on a tank-on-tank battle. We weren't dueling it out with other tanks. Yeah.
So what did you do south of Basra?
So February 28th hit, and it was the ceasefire, and so we just stopped. Remember, there was the highway of death going on,
Yes.
and that was huge politically. When do we stop? When have we done? What's proportional? Are we going too far, so to speak? And so it was cease and desist all combat operations and just hold in place, wait for further orders. And then from there, the ceasefire was solidified. And then all of 1st Cav marshaled out in the middle of the desert, assembled together, and we were just waiting there for orders to redeploy. So we deployed in October, and we redeployed to Fort Hood on April. So it was a very short deployment, 6 months, pretty short, 7 months maybe.
So you came back to Khobar Towers in Dhahran.
So then we came back we had to go to Khobar Towers, and there we had to clean our tanks completely, had to pull the engine out completely, wipe everything down, no dust. I mean, these tanks have been in the desert sand for months, and of course by EPA standards nothing could come back, so I remember 3 days with no sleep. We were just cleaning tanks, just all
How
day,
did
all
you
night.
keep dust out of your engine?
Well, you have what are called V-packs on the engine, which are, think of those as air filters. And they work, but you would go only so far. You could go a decent distance, but then you had to clean out your V-packs. You had to take these, you could pull them out from the back engine compartment, and then you had to shake them out and get the dust. But yeah, the dust was a real factor. It was, that was a factor, and another thing, which was our own munitions. So we would shoot artillery rounds at logistical sites, what we would call soft skin sites. So a massive Iraqi logistics sites with trucks and other what we call light skin vehicles. And there's a munition, it's like an artillery round, but it opens up and it releases tons of these little shape charges that have a ribbon on them. And so it keeps it, it's like a shuttlecock, and the shape charge hits the top and, you know, it destroys vehicles, it destroys whatever. Well, these would hit the sand and not ignite. But as we moved and maneuvered across the desert, the track would blow them up. And light track, like a 113 personnel carrier, it could break the links in the track, which means the crew has to dismount, look for these little, what we call little bomblets, you know, because if you step on one, it could go off. And then, you know, so crews would have to be fixing their track. A tank track was too, you know, too stout for that to break. But in the evening, you'd be maneuvering along and you'd look at tracks, you'd see these flashes of these, you know, these bomblets going off, shape charges.
Mm-hmm. So how long were you in Arabia, Dhahran, when you came back?
We were in Khobar. It's hard for me to remember. It seemed like a long time because at that point you have no mission other than to wait. And of course we had a lot of divisions there. So First Cav was behind 82nd Airborne. So all of 82nd had to redeploy. Then First Cav would redeploy. But I think we were in Khobar's maybe a week and a half, maybe 2 weeks.
Have any contact with the local people?
We had very little.
Okay.
In fact, it was, I did go to an officers club in Dhahran, and we were politely kicked out. We were looking for a phone just to call home, you know, but you know, we weren't Muslim. So the Saudi Arabia was very exclusive. We were very quarantined. So there was no interaction really with the community of Saudi Arabia.
Like chaplain had to wear the happy face.
Yeah.
They could not have the cross.
They couldn't have the cross, and it was very, very limited interaction with the Saudis.
So how'd you come back?
I'm sorry.
How'd you travel back to the States?
We loaded up our equipment back on ships, and then we flew.
Okay.
Yeah.
And you landed where?
Now, I had 6 deployments, so it's. I have to remember when I came back from Saudi Arabia. Where did we land first? I don't remember where we touched on. We ultimately landed at North Fort Hood, which was the airfield. I do remember that, and it was early in the morning, still dark when we got off. And I remember it was one where they bring the stairs to the aircraft and you come out, so you're outside. It wasn't that tunnel. And I remember coming off and you could smell the green in the air. You could smell that there was life. And this is Fort Hood, Texas, not the greenest place. But I remember just smelling vegetation. It was just so nice.
Did you come back a changed person?
Yeah, I think I did. I was young. I was probably 24 or 23, you know, a new lieutenant. I remember the prep to deploy To me, it was exciting. It was adventure. I was single. I'm a young man. I'm not married. I have my own apartment. To me, this was a big adventure. And then coming back was, I can't say I felt like, dramatically changed, but I felt grateful. I felt much more appreciative of America, of our freedoms, of, because we knew how things were going on in Saudi Arabia. We didn't see a lot of interaction with people. Much later, GWOT, I did. But Saudi Arabia, like I said, we were deliberately quarantined out in the middle of the desert. And then as we did interact slightly with the Bedouins. But even when we got near Basra, Iraq, it was there was no civilian population. We were out remote desert, so very little interaction with the people. Now, Dhahran, what you're interacting with were what we call third country nationals. The employees, so they're from Pakistan, they're from Bangladesh. And, we did have interaction with those people.
Okay. So after Desert Storm, what to do?
So then we redeployed back. I was a tank platoon leader. Then I became a tank company executive officer. We did our standard things of going to the National Training Center in the Mojave Desert and training.
Is that Fort Irwin?
That's Fort Irwin, California. So though that just carried on, tank gunnery, month-long training in the desert in Mojave. And then I became the S3 Air. And then I had a decision to make. Either my initial commitment from ROTC was up, so I could go to the career course, which back then would be Armor Officers Advanced Course, or back then I wanted to go Special Forces. So I put in a Special Forces packet, and I had a Special Forces selection course to go to. But I also I was a railhead commander, putting 13th COSCOM, Corps Support Command, on the railhead to go to the NTC and train, and met a very beautiful transportation second lieutenant there on the railhead. And I married her, and we're still together. And so now at that point I'm dating, I'm engaged, and I'm thinking of going Special Forces. But ultimately, when I was an armor officer, about 2 years into my time, I just had this bizarre calling. I was raised up in a Christian home, but never saw myself in ministry to be a chaplain. So then I realized I was going to forfeit, just for the sake of time, Special Forces and get out of the Army, which was hard for me at that point, because I only went in for 4 years, and my goal was to get out and be a wildlife biologist. But I remember signing the paperwork to get out. But for me, it was just a sabbatical. I kept telling my friends I'm going to be back right after seminary as a chaplain. But it was hard to get out, and it was hard because I really enjoyed it. As you were explaining, I worked with some of the best people. It was just amazing camaraderie, amazing people, great missions, a great life. It really was. And so we got married, my wife and I, Kathy, at the First Cav Chapel. And then we got out, and I went back home to California with my bride and started seminary.
Where'd you go?
I went to Fuller Theological Seminary in Pasadena. And then did some training with the Army during seminary, what was called chaplain candidate training. So now you're kind of, in one sense, kind of like a grad school cadet once again. But now I'm going to seminary and I'm training how to be a chaplain. And finished seminary, had to get ordained, had to reapply. So I had to exit active duty with separation of church.
Okay. You left the Army to be a chaplain?
I got off of my initial commitment, which was 95, well, December 94, I got out as an armor officer, went to seminary to become a chaplain.
Now why did you have to get out of the Army?
Because I had to go to seminary and I had to get ordained.
Okay.
And the way that works, you probably heard of the FLIP program for lawyers, medical school, military, law school, military, medical school. You don't have to get out. But probably with some view of separation of church and state to go to seminary, you actually had to fully get off of active duty. I had to go to seminary, get ordained, get endorsed to come back on active duty, and reapply to come on active duty.
Where'd you go to seminary?
January 95 is when
Where?
I started.
Where?
Fuller Theological Seminary in Pasadena, California.
Okay. How long did that last?
That was, I mean, going straight through is probably 3 or 4 years.
Okay.
But I also did some Army training as a chaplain candidate. And I went to Officer's Basic Course for 4 months, so I lost a semester there. I did some other training up at Fort Lewis, Washington. So all in all, it was a 6-year break in service.
Okay. And then you applied to get back in,
Then I applied to get back in,
and you were accepted.
and I was accepted. In January 2001, I reported to Fort Stewart, Georgia.
Okay.
And they assigned me to an armor battalion. So
Okay.
I was back home with tanks.
So you're Fort Stewart, Georgia. What unit were you assigned to?
464 armor. Yeah, right there.
Oh, 464.
That was my guide on.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, that's all I needed.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you, Joe. I was going to Fort Stewart. They sent me to field artillery, but then they found out I had been an armor officer. So then they sent me to 4th Battalion, 64th Armor Regiment, 464 Armor. And that's where I was at Fort Stewart.
Okay. What did you do at Fort Stewart as a chaplain?
So I was back home. Literally, I got out of the Army as an armor officer. Now I'm a battalion chaplain of about close to 700 men in an armor battalion. So my job is it's special staff to the battalion commander. So I have to assess morale, take care of soldiers, take care of family members, prepare soldiers. There's a very, what we call now resiliency, but this aspect of being spiritually fit to fight. It's more than just physical. It's more than just emotional or mental. There's also a spiritual dynamic to be separated from family, to be in austere combat situations, and to have the resiliency physically, emotionally, mentally, and also spiritually to deal with that. So that's a large part of what I was doing.
Now, as an Army chaplain, were you trained to do Protestant, Jewish, and Catholic services?
No. So if you use the term ecumenical, that would be Christian.
Okay.
So everything from Catholic to every flavor of Protestant would be ecumenical.
Okay.
Army chaplaincy is pluralistic, but I was a Presbyterian chaplain. So the Army can only utilize me. What I personally do in a service is Presbyterian, Protestant services. Now, as Presbyterians, we're infant baptizers, and that's important to the Army because there's not many of them. But let's say you're a fellow soldier and you're Jewish, and we're going out to the field to train. It's my responsibility to bring in the rabbi for you. So I don't do Jewish services. Or if you're Catholic and I'm Protestant, it's my job to ensure that you have Catholic ministry, or you have Buddhist, even Wiccan, that. It's the Title 10 free exercise of religious expression.
Okay. How long were you at Fort Stewart?
I got there in 2001 and left in 2004. So I got there January of 2001, and then September 9/11 happened. So once again, I'm brand new on a unit, and a few months later, we're on alert to go to war. And so I was with 3rd Infantry Division at Fort Stewart, and we were part of the tip of the spear, if you will, going into Iraq.
So what did you do?
So now I'm not an armor officer. I'm a battalion chaplain. I have no weapon. I can't have a weapon, but I have a chaplain assistant that is my assistant for the ministry to help me out. But also, he is my combatant. So we deployed to Kuwait, and we were in Kuwait for I personally deployed in November of 2002, and we were there till we were in Kuwait, again in the desert. It's what's now the Udari Range Complex area. It's east of Doha in Kuwait, out in the desert. And so we did maneuver training, we did gunnery training. Of course, I'm not doing that anymore. I'm no longer armor. Mm-hmm. My role is ministering to the soldiers, religious services, counseling, assessing, advising the commander on religion and morale and assessment of how the unit's doing that way. I'm working with commanders and first sergeants, troubled soldiers, give them to me, let me help you work with them, that, kind of get soldiers back on their feet, get their heads back in the game. I could, an element where I could assist the different companies in the battalion that way, mm-hmm. working closely with first sergeants and company commanders. And then we were out there in the desert waiting. We didn't know what would happen. And then I remember Saddam Hussein launched some Scud missiles in Kuwait City, and that we launched. I think that was March 21st, and we crossed the border. And there's a map right there that I have of the whole operation. We crossed the border, hit Iraqi scout elements right away, and pretty much just went through them like a hot knife through butter. Mm-hmm. But what was very interesting about that operation from a military history perspective is the rapid movement of heavy vehicles. So you think 70-ton tanks, Bradley fighting vehicles, 113, recovery vehicles, M88, large heavy track vehicles. And so we had a heavy metal route of all these armored vehicles moving up, and then a separate route for our wheeled vehicles. But it was just a non-stop movement, once again, from the border of Kuwait and Iraq all the way up to Baghdad. And
excuse me. So what'd you do in Baghdad?
Well, we moved north from Kuwait. As soon as we crossed the border, we had contact. We went through them quickly, and we just kept moving. Yeah.
When you in Iraq? Was it 2000?
It was end of March 2003 is when we entered Iraq.
Okay.
And then we got to our real first, we had contact right as we crossed the border, but that was pretty quick. And then we got up to, I'm forgetting that. I'll have to cheat and look at the map. I'm forgetting the names of the towns. If I said them, Sadr was in, it was a long time ago. I forget. But that was our first contact. That was before Baghdad. And we had several firefights. One was near Objective Peaches, crossing the Euphrates River, heading near Baghdad. So we were south of Baghdad. And of course, Baghdad, the big thing was the airport, mm-hmm. and then of course the city. And so we were in what we called Objective Charlie, which was south of Baghdad, 20, 30 kilometers maybe. And we had to clear out east. We didn't want any Iraqi forces behind us as we moved north into Iraq. So we had a cleanup operation to do there. And there was some pretty good fighting there. And one of my jobs as a chaplain, I'd been to Ranger School, I'd been an armor officer. One of the things I've always was good at was land navigation. And so the commander wanted me to move the medics. So I was often moving the medics from one company to another for these combat missions. And we were moving the medics to Charlie Company, who was in contact, and it was just amazing, some of these fights that we were in then, because now we're near the Euphrates River, we're near the Tigris River. It's wet. Right immediately along the river, it's very thick, date palms, thick bushes. Looked a lot like Southern California, some of the thick areas. But and then they would have flooded fields for agriculture. So we're restricted to these raised roads, probably very similar to like a Vietnam situation. You're restricted in your movements. You're locked to these roads. So we were moving, and I look to my right and I see this BMP down there. It's a Soviet vehicle. It's a infantry fighting vehicle, not a tank, but track vehicle. And we stopped, and we got out of my vehicle and I looked at it, because most of the vehicles we've seen were blown up because tank companies already gone before us. And so we get out, and I remember there were bushes in front of us where this BMP was, and it was maybe 60 yards in front of us. And I remember seeing these flashes, and I'm like, oh, those are muzzle flashes. We're getting shot at. And my chaplain assistant was engaging, and everyone started engaging. And this is one of my favorite stories, and it's about Specialist Maury, who is just awesome. So I get behind my Humvee, and I can hear bullets going through my Humvee, and I radio in battalion headquarters, say we're in contact. And PFC Maury is up on top of a Humvee with a 50 cal, and he is just plowing the soil in front of us. I mean, he's just engaging. And then but as he's shooting, I see tracer rounds going all right next to him. And I'm just waiting for him to get hit. I mean, not that I wanted him to, but just like, and then he stops, and he's on top of his Humvee, and it looks like he's getting an MRE. I'm like, and I remember yelling at him. I'm like, Maury, lay down fire. Like, we gotta lay down fire. Well, he gets up, and he's like 18 years old. And there's tracer rounds still, they're shooting at him. And he comes up with this AT-4, kind of like a modern day bazooka. It's got a rear safety, front safety, and he's just aiming. It seems like this takes forever, especially when you see the tracer rounds going next to him. And then he shoots this BMP, and it's loaded with ammunition. So when he hits it, it just blows up. The turret comes falling off, the Iraqis go running, and that was it. But so we put him in for Valor. He got an ARCOM with a V device for that.
Oh, is he your assistant?
He wasn't. He was the S4, the logistics officer's driver, or gunner, I should say. It was his gunner. But he's an 18-year-old kid. He's unafraid. He's doing his job. He's laying down horrendous fire with a 50 cal, suppressing the Iraqis. And then he has the wherewithal to get an AT-4 and shoot the BMP and, put an end to the fight. Yeah.
So how long were you over in Iraq?
So we got in Iraq in March, and then we did the Thunder Run into Baghdad. Mm-hmm. And so our sister battalion took BIOP, Baghdad International Airport. We took, our battalion, what is now called the Green Zone. Mm-hmm. And so we did this march, this basically just an occupy by force. It was amazing. Excuse me, because you have to remember the Iraqi minister of information was telling all the Iraqis that we were getting slaughtered south of Baghdad. So you could be driving with your family going to the grocery store, so to speak, turn left on Main Street, and all of a sudden here's a column of hundreds of U.S. tanks, and you're like, they're not supposed to be here. And then, of course, we were fighting not so much the Iraqi citizens. We were fighting the Fedayeen, who were foreign fighters coming from Saudi Arabia, Kuwait, all over. So we weren't fighting Baghdad citizens. We were fighting a foreign force that was there to get us out. So we had a big battle in Baghdad. Before we did the Thunder Run into Baghdad, we were marching along the highway, the main artery going north into Baghdad. And our brigade headquarters was in this old Iraqi brick officers building. We used it as the headquarters. And I remember waiting. I'm in a chalk line, waiting for my my chalk to start moving north into Iraq. And it was a very overcast day, and I hear this like, and it just kept coming and getting louder. And I said to my chaplain assistant, I said, "Oh, here comes one of our boys." I thought, perfect. We are in a line on this highway, so if an Iraqi pilot, we'd be easy picking. So I thought this was like an F-18, like circling us to defend us. And then it just started getting louder and louder and louder. And I go, a Humvee windshield is just flat. So I go, man, that guy's flying low. And I looked to see if I could see him below the cloud cover because it was really low. And I see this silver telephone pole flying through the air, right across, dead center hit on our brigade tactical operations center. And it blows up right next to me in a Hollywood explosion. And there are bricks, there are Humvee tires 150 feet in the air. And at this point, I was thinking, is this red air at enemy aircraft? But I realized that silver telephone pole was a Frog missile that the Iraqis had launched. And later on, I think I found out the Soviets had given them 12-digit grids where we were located. So this Frog missile impacted directly on our brigade headquarters, killed 5 people. What saved everyone was we had the command vehicles. It's a armored vehicle, 577 is what it's called, command vehicles, lined up with people working in between them, and that's what saved a lot of the people. They were covered. But then you look up in the sky, there's bricks, hundreds of them, falling from who knows how high. If they're going to Humvee tires landing on us, and then we moved north and did the Thunder Run into Baghdad, and our brigade commander made the decision. He said, "We got tanks in the city in Baghdad, we're staying." And so we stayed. The initial plan was to move in and then move out, but we occupied the green zone, we took BIOP, and we stayed put. Then, 3rd ID, we were supposed to return. That was supposed to be over. But 1st Armored Division came to replace us. And we did what's called the RIP, relief in place, and we still didn't have any orders. And we were supposed to redeploy. And now 1st Armored Division has full reign of the sector. We're kind of sitting on our thumbs, wondering what to do, and then finally we get orders, and it's 3rd ID prep for combat operations. You're not going back, you're going to Fallujah. And so then we went to Fallujah. And we were in Fallujah till, I think, July. And then after that, we redeployed.
Okay. Back to the States?
Back to Fort Stewart, Georgia.
Okay.
Right.
Okay. How long are you over there in Iraq and Kuwait?
I got to Kuwait. That was about a 9-month deployment, all in all. I got to Kuwait in November, Iraq in March, and we redeployed in July.
Okay. Have any contact with the people of Baghdad?
We redeployed in August, I think. I'm sorry?
Have any contact with the people of Baghdad?
Yes, a lot of contact with
What
people.
was their attitude?
Oh, it was incredible. So we got into, initially when we did the Thunder Run into Baghdad, it was, Baghdad isn't quite as big as Tulsa. It's not that big, but it's a metropolitan city. So when we initially did the Thunder Run, Baghdad was a ghost town. Now we're fighting Fedayeen, but that was, I think, April 9th was our last fight in Baghdad. And then after that, for lack of a better term, the Iraqi citizens just kind of came out of the woodwork. And so we took one of Saddam's palaces right on the Euphrates, right on the Tigris River. And some Iraqis came up and they said, "Hey, can we fish here?" And we're like, "It's your river. Yeah, you can fish." They said, "Well, Saddam said he would shoot us if we fish this river." And we're like, "It's your river. I mean, it's your place." So they came and made us meals. They invited us to their homes. I would walk down Baghdad and go to people's homes for dinner. Iraqi citizens, everyone was going, America. We would drive our Humvees through Baghdad and go to restaurants. Now we were in our battle rattle, full battle kit. But it was pretty peaceful. Things didn't start going bad in Baghdad till after we got into Fallujah. Things were never good in Fallujah. Fallujah was always different from Baghdad.
Why?
Because Baghdad was eclectic. You had Christians, you had Sunni, and you had Shia. And people just kind of got along in the city. Fallujah was specifically Sunni. And so we had great contacts in Baghdad. Interpreters, people we knew. We moved to Fallujah. We were on an old British airfield from World War II in Habbaniyah specifically. And I remember one day a taxi came up and they said these people wanted to see you. Well, they were Iraqi friends from Baghdad. They were Shia. And so we thought, oh, hey, good to see you guys, whatever. We didn't know. And it wasn't later till our interpreter said, they risked their lives to come to see you. They could have been killed in Fallujah as Shia. And that taxi ride from Baghdad to Fallujah was a month's wages. So this great sacrifice on their part to see us for half an hour, whatever, they risked their lives. It was a month's wages, and they did it. And we just didn't know. We didn't know what we didn't know. That was such a feat on their part, a sacrifice on their part. So these kind of interactions we had. We worked close with our interpreters that came from the area. And we had Iraqi interpreters fight with us, armed with our units, fighting alongside us.
How did Saddam take power in Iraq?
It's related to the Ba'ath Party, which I think first started in Syria and in the 60s. And I don't know that history real well, how he specifically got into power. But what was very interesting, our battalion, our unit found $780 million in $100 bills. So we were in the green zone, and it's all empty, but this was the rich zone. This is all of Saddam's friends, cronies, and we had occupied these buildings that just used to be homes, and we used them as tactical operation centers and as headquarters for our units. And the battalion commander said, hey, I need stuff built, something to add on that we needed for our headquarters. And he told some NCOs, non-commissioned officers, to go out and find some tools. So they go in the back and they're opening these sheds in the backyard, and they're filled to the brim with these tin boxes. Well, each box is $3 million in $300,000 bands of $100 bills. All said and done, we collect it, and it's $780 million in cash. And then the CIA got involved, and we realized there was $1 billion withdrawal from a Jordanian bank, and probably the rest of the money, 20 million, was probably Saddam's wife and daughters that used to go to. There's only so much you can carry.
Yeah.
We put this overloaded a 5-ton truck of just $100 bills. And then, of course, we gave that to Bremer, who was in the green zone. So we initially took that palace.
Bremer.
Bremer was he was the first, he wasn't the first. I forgot the first guy. But it was the civilian, it was the State Department.
Okay.
Right after we took.
Okay.
The State Department moved in. Initially, it was a retired general. He was replaced by Bremer, and Bremer was he was like the ambassador, if you will, working for the State Department.
So you came back to the States, and what do you do?
So after that deployment, I came back to the States, received orders to go to Germany. So I went to Hohenfels, Germany for 3 years, was not deployed at that time frame. So that was a nice break. And after Germany was an administrative, we were on Hohenfels, which is a training post, a maneuver training post in Europe. And I worked with the garrison providing religious support for the garrison. Then later on, I worked for the OPFOR opposing force, 1-4 Infantry, which would act like the enemy. They would train like the enemy, so you'd bring in U.S. forces into Hohenfels, and you would fight 1-4 Infantry, a U.S. infantry battalion, but who was trained to be your opponent, if that makes sense. So you would have to beat the OPFOR. After that, 2007, I went to Fort Riley, Kansas as a brigade chaplain. And then I deployed again, 2008, 2009, back to Baghdad. And so I was there in Baghdad for a year as a brigade chaplain. And then I redeployed back to Fort Riley, Kansas.
How had Baghdad changed?
Baghdad changed a lot. Baghdad changed a lot. So every street was lined with concrete corridors. Large pillars. It was a concrete base with the wall that you could join together. They kind of fit like Lego pieces, but 20 feet high maybe, or not. But you would line the roads with that, and that was to keep, because now there are insurgents everywhere. Now every time you went, when you left the FOB, the Forward Operating Base, and you entered Baghdad, it was game on at any point. It could be an IED, it could be a thrown shape charge, it could be snipers, it could be artillery, mortars, whatever. It was game on when you left. You could go on a patrol for a week, every day, nothing would happen. But you never know, there was always something going on. Always some sort of getting shot at, hitting an IED, firefights, Baghdad was very different.
Should we have taken Saddam out?
Should we have taken Saddam out? Interesting enough, when on my first deployment there on the 14th July bridge, Saddam was right on the other side. We found out later on. That back then, if you were to ask me, I would say yes. Right now, I think here's what I would say. This idea of nation building has been an utmost failure. It just has. I'm not an apologist for Saddam Hussein. I think he was a tyrant. I think he was a dictator. I think all those things. But he kept the peace. There was more peace in Iraq with him there than with him gone. Now, how is Iraq right now? I don't know. I've been out of touch with it. But things fell apart very quickly. Yeah. And here's the shame. So we were at Assassin's Gate in the Green Zone, and now what we did is we abolished the military. Let's say you're a 3-star general in the Iraqi army, and now we say, nope, you're no longer a general. You're coming to the gate, and you're talking to me, a soldier, and you say, I need to speak to Bremer. To me, as a U.S. soldier, I'm just told you can't come in. But you say, I want to talk to Bremer. I'm Lieutenant General so-and-so, and I have this information. So many of these people were turned away. They were disvalued. They were discredited. They weren't, so what do you do when a foreign power comes in, takes your power, disbands the army? Of course, the Ba'ath Party was universal. You couldn't do anything without being the Ba'ath Party. So it's kind of goes back to the denazification, right? I mean, if you have anything to do with the Ba'ath Party, we won't talk with you. Well, then you're not talking to anyone. How do you keep the infrastructure with all the people that know how to keep the infrastructure? How do you keep the leadership? So it's, I feel like I'm being an armchair general, but what do I know? But these are observations I just have just from common sense.
I heard about the zoo in Baghdad.
Oh, I was there. I was there. So it was Uday. I was staying in Uday's little, what we called his concubine cottage. It's literally what it was. And then when we first got to Baghdad, we saw this zoo. And there were sheep. There was a bear. There's a bear that got out. We had to actually shoot it. And then there were lions. There were tigers. There were leopards. And the sheep were there just as food. You could see the gate to open up. But by the time we got there, the lion, all all the great cats were starving. They were skin and bones. I mean, they were just, so we got there, we opened up the gate, let these starving sheep in, and then instantly the lions and the tiger, I mean, it was just like Discovery Channel right in front of us. They devoured them. But a lot of rumors we heard from the Iraqis. I don't know if they're rumors, but here's what the Iraqi citizens told us. Uday used to travel around Baghdad with his lion, with his tiger, and he'd go into restaurants with his tiger. And if he didn't like someone, what they would tell us is he would bring him to the zoo and feed him to his tiger. You know, whether that's true or not, I don't know, but we heard that multiple times from citizens. Yeah. So I saw that zoo.
How long were you in the Army?
25 years.
25 years.
Yeah.
And when did you retire?
July of 2019,
Okay.
and came here.
Why'd you come to Bartlesville?
That's for the people.
Okay.
I met the people here. I met the pastoral search committee. I met the
When did you
town.
first come here? I mean,
I was at Fort Jackson, and I was working on a plan to revise the chaplain school, which is at Fort Jackson. And it was then I realized it's time to retire. I want to get out. I want to pastor. And so I started looking at places to go, and I wanted to go. My choice would have been Western Montana, somewhere in the Rocky Mountains, elk hunting, fly fishing, all that. And Fort Riley was our Army home. We loved it there at Fort Riley. We were there as a brigade chaplain, deputy division chaplain, division chaplain. And long story short, I'm putting resumes in Colorado, looking for church openings in Montana. There weren't any. And I told my wife, I said, well, there's a church in Oklahoma. We had no roots here. The only route was, hey, it's 3 hours south of Fort Riley. We like that. She goes, throw him a resume. Threw him a resume. We met the people, and we said, these people in Oklahoma are awesome. And then as I was retiring, which took about 9 months, I would do monthly trips out here. The church flew my wife and I out, and we just met the people in the town and said, game over. We're going to Oklahoma. And love it here.
good. Anything else you want to talk about?
No, I think that's maybe I said too much.
I'd like to do a word association. I'll give you some words and you give me your reaction.
Okay.
The first one is ROTC.
Fun.
Officer's Basic.
Learned a lot.
M1 Tank.
Awesome.
Fort Hood.
Big.
Desert Shield.
Adventure.
Saudi Arabia.
Oppressive.
Desert Storm.
A challenge.
Army Chaplain.
A great life.
9/11.
Sobering.
Kuwait.
Political.
Iraq.
In trouble.
Saddam Hussein.
Tyrant.
George Bush.
Trying to do the right thing is what comes to mind.
How do you want to be remembered?
How do I want to be remembered? Is the end that near? How do I want to remember? I would say I want to be remembered as a faithful Christian.
Well, sir, this is an excellent interview.
Well, I enjoyed it.
I want to thank you for your service and thank you for the interview.
Yeah, thank you.
And again, this is February 21st. My name is Joe Todd. This has been an interview with Peter Johnson in Bartlesville, Oklahoma. Thank you.